our first stream game is going to be Joseph Ugarte up against Kayla Smith. So both these players are very talented players. Kayla Smith coming off a day 2 in Atlanta and top cuts a lot of our locals here in the tri-state area. And Joseph Ugarte doesn't really need an explanation, but just also got top 4 at Atlanta and has done countless other things here in the Pokemon scene. But an exciting round 1 for you guys here.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget, considering we don't see him at these locals often enough. Joseph does live on Long Island. He is a New York local. So, yeah, it is fun to see some of our local players coming out just for a chance at this huge pot of money that we have up for first place in the tournament. I'm sure someone like Joe is hardly dying for the championship points here, but hey, got to show your stuff. If you have been focusing on using Miraidon for all format, you have to kind of give it a send-off tournament like this.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've been using a team like Joe has the entire tournament, you're you're confident with the team. You know what you can do with the team. And if there's $500 on the line, as well as those Journey Together packs and the CP is kind of like the afterthought in that instance. But again, Joe's mastery of this team is going to be super exciting to see. But let's also not forget to talk about Kayla Smith here, who's featuring a really cool Calyrex Shadow team with the Dondozo. Has a lot of tools on it with something like that Weezing that I mentioned before in the Atlanta stream. Something like the Weezing with that utility has tons of tools that it uses to support something like the Dondozo and allows something like the Calyrex Shadow to sweep later. It's really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I think these Dozo teams are so difficult to fight against because, like you said, the Dozo and the CSR are going to complement each other a little bit better than you'd think. Dozo can really lay down some of that chip damage that's setting up for a CSR to grab those Grenade boosts and sweep at the very end of the game. And, of course, Weezing is also just such a unique Pokemon to fight against, considering how many Pokemon in this restricted format are relying on those abilities. And you probably didn't have the foresight to slap an ability shield on all 6 of your Pokemon.
Not that you would if you could. I don't know how a team of 6 ability shield Pokemon would be.
You feel great against Weezing.
I mean, if you fight against Weezing, it's just an auto and hands to the hair, just absolutely stressed. But luckily, our players don't have to worry about that today. The Weezing, as you said, though, does a really good job at supporting that Dondozo with the toxic spikes, allowing teams like Joe's who want to kind of keep Miraidon, keep the terrain, pivoting out, make sure you have enough HP on it to kind of break through the Dondozo. It's going to be really important at managing those turns of poison. I actually believe we saw a version of it in Atlanta go up against Joe's team, so we'll see if it plays out similarly. But I believe the Calyrex Shadow is Pollen Puff on this team, so having that as well as a potential mind game almost where it's the Dozo and the Calyrex, you could Pollen Puff your Dondozo and continue to heal it up, but then of course you have to worry about if Joe's going to attack that slot or worry if the Calyrex is going to stay in.
Keeping a Dozo healthy against a Miraidon team sounds like a difficult task, even with Pollen Puff on your side. I am curious to see what's going to happen here. Like you said, I think Joe was able to come out on top in that Atlanta game, but I don't remember if it was close or anything. I think, like you were saying, Weezing spreading poison in a matchup like this is really good. It's not like Joe has, let's say, a Moongus is one of the classic counters to Weezing to just be able to clear those toxic spikes with its poison typing. I think the only poison type Joe has to work with is Terra Poison on the Urshifu. You would need a lot of foresight to kind of pull that off, get rid of the toxic spikes that way. So I'm not sure if that's something that I expect to see come up in this game or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing in that matchup is that Joe has access to a Terra Grass Volcarona with the Quiver Dance and Giga Drain. But the thing about that is if you do keep it in, again, that poison that the Weezing is doing. So the Volcarona is going to be on a timer. But the thing is if you can get the Volcarona and the Miraidon on the field, you're able to get a knockout with the Miraidon on the Dondozo, and you have setups in your Volcarona. Again, easier said than done, but you kind of sweep through the rest of the team once that Volcarona is set up.
Right. I think the fact that Joe is going to be working with Light Screen and Reflect from Grimmsnarl, I think that's going to be relatively easy to set up against a Calyrex Shadow Rider team. Calyrex Shadow, not famous for dealing with the Grimmsnarl very quickly. That paired with things like Iron Hands, Volcarona, Miraidon, I think that could be really, really tough for the Dozo to get through. I think in the Atlanta stream game we saw, Joe was really able to exploit just the Dozo's damage output kind of falling off, and then use those dead turns to set up with Volcarona, get your Quiver Dances up, knock out the Dozo, Giga Drain to get your HP back. Sometimes a solo Dozo on the field that can't swap out is really going to be exploited by someone like Joe, who just has a mastery over positioning in the game and really has the Dozo at his mercy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it as well is the Dondozo team has flexibility, but not nearly as much of flexibility as something like the Miraidon, where you kind of need both. You quite literally need both the pieces for that commander ability to activate. You need both of them on the field that Tatsugiri can enter the Dondozo's mouth and give it that commander ability. They really need to be together, but it's all about, I think, as Dondozo, finding that window of opportunity to get the Tatsugiri on field or keeping Dozo long enough so that you can find that opportunity.
One kind of unique thing about Kayla's team compared to like almost any other version of Dozo that I've seen is there's an Amoonguss on it. It's really not been one of like my personal favorite partners for Dozo, but I think in this matchup, one interesting thing you could do with the Weezing is if you've got Weezing out, Hadron Engine is never being activated, Electric Drain isn't going up. Suddenly, if you're thinking about pairing Weezing and Amoonguss, you might actually have a chance to connect Sleeps against a Miraidon team, which is not something you get to see very often. I wonder if Kayla's going to try to pull that off just because Miraidon teams are also pretty famous for the amount of damage they can put out, but maybe it's a potential avenue to look at here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, but we do have our leads here from both our players against Kayla Smith and Joseph Ugarte. Kayla's going to be leading off with that Galarian Weezing and the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Joe is going to be leading off with that Miraidon and the Grimmsnarl.
These feel like pretty standard leads out of both teams. I think these are just like almost exactly what you're used to seeing. Grimmsnarl Miraidon is really safe. It's not like even as a result of turning off the Prankster, your Miraidon's not going down in one turn. Calyrex Shadow is not going to be able to deal with it. So Miraidon is still going to have a lot of pressure on the Calyrex Shadow slot. I think we saw Joe clicking something like a Draco Meteor, which Kayla is going to have to do something about if she doesn't want to get knocked out in one hit by it.
And exactly like what you said before with the Miraidon, even with something like the Calyrex Shadow Rider, is going to go for a Protect here. Something like the Grimmsnarl isn't really able to get punished here. And is it going to be able to set up screens, but instead is going to go for attack as we see the Miraidon go for a Draco Meteor into that Protect. Poison Gas coming out from Kayla's Weezing there, going to get that poison that we talked about onto both these Pokemon, starting down that clock to make sure Joe really has to pick the next turns very carefully to preserve HP on that Miraidon. And actually, excuse me, the Grimmsnarl is going to go for screens, but I've already forgotten. Weezing has neutralized my brain and has also neutralized the abilities of the Pokemon in the field. So Grimmsnarl loses that Prankster, and these screens are going to go up later from that Grimmsnarl.
Still, I think that was like the really interesting thing about the play that Joe went for. It's like, you know, if you're Draco Meteor to threaten a one-shot on this Calyrex, you're kind of saying like, hey, you don't get to go for Astral Barrage turn one unless you want to go down. He's effectively kind of gotten Prankster without having Prankster because he's still going to have the light screen up before the Calyrex Shadow hits him. However, this Miraidon is really on a timer right now. I do not think Joe would want to leave it in to take a Barrage followed up by something like a Strange Steam from the Weezing, even if that means trading for the Calyrex. I think losing your Miraidon too early is really going to be a death sentence against it on Dozo. It looks like Kayla's not even willing to give the Calyrex up just yet.
Yeah, we see switching to Dondozo here, and I think this is the perfect target for Joe, especially if there is no Tatsugiri into that slot. The Draco Meteor is going off. Dondozo hangs on in the red, though, but that's tons of damage, and even though there are drops on the Miraidon, the Strange Team is going to bring the Miraidon down to 50% there. The Thunder Wave landing into that Weezing. But the really important thing about that turn is that damage trade was way more favorable for Joe in this instance, I would say. Getting that Dondozo down so low, even if you were at a little bit higher HP because the Dondozo is unaware, if Joe were to go for another Draco Meteor into that Dondozo and the Tatsugiri were to switch in, it's ignoring the special attack drops that the Draco Meteors gave to its own Miraidon.
See, I might have to disagree with you on that. I think Kayla was willing to let this Dozo take a lot of damage to preserve HP on the Calyrex, which is probably not something that Joe expected going into that turn. I think we might see the Dozo not be the sweeper at this point, but I think Kayla's telling us that she really plans to use the Calyrex Shadow as the primary sweeper at this point instead. Miraidon's still locked into Draco. It's not going to be able to damage either of these Pokemon or protecting Dozo or Fairy-type Weezing. So here's another free turn out of Weezing.
Yeah, absolutely. The Weezing does get paralyzed there, not going to be able to go for another Strange Theme, which would have gotten Miraidon even lower for those poison turns to take Miraidon off the field and out of play for Joe. But Miraidon is going to get to move again. I do think that Strange Stream might have knocked out the Miraidon from that range. Another Draco Meteor is a threat here, and this is the Volcarona that I was talking about before. Could be dangerous because the Calyrex isn't immediately threatening you now, and you do have the screens up. Volcarona is going to become a threat if you start setting up these Quiver Dances. The Draco Meteor does land, though, into the Dondozo, knocking out that threat for Kayla.
Yeah, I think this is some really good positioning from Joe, kind of saying, like, hey, you've given my Volcarona free time to set up. I have light screen. I am not worried about a single thing this Weezing can do to me. Poison Gas is going to add up on the Volcarona really, really slowly. I don't think Kayla is happy that this is the best thing she can be doing about the Volcarona right now. And it feels like we're kind of headed towards, like, Calyrex Shadow Rider versus Volcarona matchup to sort of decide what's going to happen this game.
The thing I will say is we know that Joe has Ditto in the back, but what's really interesting is if Calyrex Shadow Rider comes in for this slot, because the Ditto won't be across from the Calyrex, it actually won't be able to transform into it, which is, I think, why Joe brought it in this matchup. Kind of able to play that speed game with the Calyrex on Kayla's side, but if you have your Volcarona set up on that side, you can't really do anything about that.
Yeah, I think that's, Ditto is such a unique Pokemon to play with because how often you have to think about, like, what slot your Pokemon is in. I'm sure this is something that Joe's used to doing, but it almost seems like Kayla's kind of caught him off guard and said, hey, your Ditto's not going to be in the slot you want it to be. Your Ditto... Wait, because neutralizing gas, this Ditto is just going to be staying as a normal type right now, acting as a perfect switch in for the Astral Barrage.
And that's just the level of mastery I think Joe has with this team and understanding of the game. That's such a unique interaction. I don't think most people are able to think of that. But yeah, Ditto's a normal type. And guess what? Astral Barrage is going to do nothing. And this Ditto with the Focus Sash is pretty much guaranteed now to click transform into something like the Calyrex.
Yeah. However, it looks like Weezing is able to go for a Strange Team, essentially disable that Focus Sash, get a Confusion on the Ditto. But we have to remember, Ditto and that Grimmsnarl in the back have some really nice switch synergy right now. You don't want to go for Psychic on a Ditto and find out that it's just going back into a Grimmsnarl.
Yeah, and we see Joe here actually hovering something like the Transform into your Volcarona, which, if you have boosts on it, that's scary. Imagine one Volcarona that's set up. Now you have to play against two, potentially. So
yeah, I think I'd rather have another, like, boosted Volcarona fighting my Calyrex Shadow than my own Calyrex Shadow, which is just going to go down to one Barrage if I happen to lose the speed tie. I think that's a really good thing for them to be thinking about here.
And this is a really smart terrestrialization that we see come out from Joe here into the Volcarona. Boost up that Giga Drain damage there on that boosted Volcarona, kind of realizing that he wins this trade regardless. If the Calyrex doesn't protect, you're most likely knocking it out with something like the Giga Drain, or at least bringing it close down in like to Life Orb range or healing up to know that you'll live. The Astral Barrage plus some poison. The thing is, though, is that you have to Astral Barrage here. If you Pollen Puff, you're not doing too much to the Volcarona. You could try to knock out the Ditto. There's just a lot of things that could go right for Joe here, and Kayla's kind of on the back foot.
And one reason that Kayla would actually really like to keep her Calyrex alive right now is we have to keep that as one active on the field, or else this Volcarona is going to be able to almost instantly eat that Citrus Berry and get back a little bit more health. However, Kayla now has to worry about two Volcaronas that have two Quiver Dances apiece. This is not the board state that I think she wants to be looking at.
Yeah, this is such a unique game because I feel like this is a line that we don't really get to see often into this Dondozo team. You kind of see where it's the Miraidon and the Dondozo, and you have to do damage to it, and it's slowly ticking down with the poisons. But Joe's approach here, taking advantage of the neutralizing gas, being able to field the Ditto and kind of set up this Volcarona that we talked about before the set is really cool. But he's not out of the woods yet. Kayla still has that confusion there on Joseph's Ditto there, so it could get confused and damaged. The Weezing there is going to eat its Citrus Berry, able to eat that Fiery Dance. This Astral Barrage has to do a lot of damage, but the Giga Drain is going to go into the Protect instead.
Yeah, Giga Drain, I think Joe has a position that really is just going to allow him to keep going for these attacks with these Pokemon. It's not like we're going to see the Volcaronas go down anytime soon, so, like, great play on Kayla for protecting the Calyrex there and making sure it doesn't go down to a Giga Drain, but it almost feels like we're delaying the inevitable here. I have a sneaking suspicion that's a Tatsugiri in the back, which is absolutely not the Pokemon you want to be fighting a pair of setup Volcaronas with.
And unfortunately, there's a paralysis there on the Wheezing for Kayla. After getting that double protect on the Calyrex Shadow, luck giveth, luck taketh, unfortunately. And this Fiery Dance here is going to fire off from the Wheezing, getting a knockout, a critical hit. That's 2 Volcaronas there, and a special attack buff to salt in the wound there for Kayla. And like you said, if something like that, Tatsugiri is in the back with the Dozo, which you can assume that it is. Not really looking too nice against these set of Volcaronas.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Kayla could reveal any Pokemon in the back that would let her see a comeback here. Even with the light screen wearing off, that just feels like too little, too late. It does turn out it's just Tatsugiri. That is the focus asset, so I guess Tatsugiri is very likely to get off one attack here. Maybe we could see some very lucky Muddy Water drops, but I probably wouldn't be getting my hope up.
Yeah, you would need a stroke of luck here with the Muddy Water drops on both of these Pokemon, and then something like Dondozo to come in and just get tons of critical hits, because even without screens, Dondozo against both these Pokemon is going to be an uphill battle. And considering how low HP it is, even if it got +6 to all of its boosts, I think these Volcaronas, I mean, I guess with Unaware, but...
I think Dozo went down to a Draco Meteor very early in the game.
Oh, it did.
Oh, Terra Dragon Tatsugiri is going to see what it can do to come back here. Calyrex not landing the triple protect to let Volcarona go down to poison. Oh, Ditto is snapping out the confusion, so that is going to be a Giga Drain. Not doing so much to a Dragon-type Tatsugiri. That's exactly the kind of defensive type that you want to have here.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that did less than I thought. I thought it was going to do about 50%. I believe the Volcarona here on the left side is at +3, I believe. But, yeah, the Dragon type being very, very nice. Let's see what the Tatsugiri goes for here. As the Calyrex faints for Kayla, unfortunately, the Tatsugiri...
Oh, Volcarona finally able to eat that Citrus Berry. Make sure that it's nowhere near going down to Poison Chip. Tatsugiri seeing what it can do with the Muddy Water.
There's just so many things with the abilities as well. There's the poison. So no drops, but the thing is with all the abilities on the field, it's so tricky to keep track of all those with the Ditto coming in being a normal type, the As-1 there from the Calyrex, the Neutralizing Gas, and how Neutralizing Gas works with the As-1 as well. So many things to keep track of. This Tatsugiri does hang on, but is not going to be able to outspeed either of these Volcaronas. Is going to go down as Joseph Ugarte takes game 1 against Kayla Smith.
This was a really masterful game from Joe, kind of saying, like, hey, I'm familiar with this Weezing strategy. I know what to do without my abilities. I know how to make my Pokemon even stronger in the case of Ditto by not having their abilities. I know how to make up for them not having the abilities like the Grimmsnarl, which kind of essentially got to have Prankster without having it. What a masterful game.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, taking advantage of that Grimmsnarl, being able to eat those Calyrex Shadow hits, especially on something like those Life Orb sets or those Citrus sets that like to set up, not particularly on the Dondozo team, but usually opt for something like that Terra Fairy Draining Kiss could do a lot of damage to something like Grimmsnarl, but because this set has something like the Pollen Puff, you don't immediately threaten the Grimmsnarl with tons of damage, and Joe's able, even without the Prankster, to set the screens for free. One thing I will say, Kayla did a very good job of in that game, though, is setting up those poisons and kind of playing for her outs and playing for those timers, knowing that not necessarily the game timer, but the timers that you set on the Pokemon when you set up those poisons, knowing that they're on a ticking clock, that they kind of go down turn by turn with that poison chip, realizing that if you get it into a range, either the Calyrex or the Dondozo could sweep. And playing around that was very, very well played from Kayla. I think just maybe a little bit more of that, maybe an extra turn or two where you can get a little bit lucky with maybe a double protect, could maybe change the game in Kayla's favor.
I think one thing that I might expect Kayla to do this next game to really get down those 1 or 2 extra turns of poison is focus on a Toxic Spikes instead of a Poison Gas. In that game, we didn't see the Poison Gas do a whole lot on the first turn of the game, just like Miraidon or Grimmsnarl never ended up fainting. However, the Volcaronas in the back really ended up being the problem. Maybe if we see an early Toxic Spikes, it's going to ensure that those Volcaronas in the back take more. However, let's look at the leads. We've got a Miraidon and a Ditto staring down a Weezing and a Calyrex. This is the same kind of position Ditto was in last game, where it just says, I don't care what you're up to, Calyrex.
Yeah, and not only does it not care, it's going to transform. Now, I'm unsure on this mechanic, but if transform goes through protect, that means Joe could potentially get a Calyrex Shadow here turn 1, and that trade that we kind of talked about from earlier is going to be very favorable for Joe, because if you know the Calyrex is faster than you right now, so it's immune to that Astral Barrage, so the only attack you'd really be taking is that Wheezing, and then you on top of that you get the transform. So we're actually going to see Joe click transform into that slot, which is now a Dondozo. The Draco Meteor is going to come in here, do tons of damage to it, bringing it down to 1 HP there for Kayla. The transform is going to go into Dondozo, though, so Joe has a Dondozo of his own. This Wheezing there, hopefully we get to see. Instead goes to the Poison Gas, no spikes, but we do get the immediate poison on the Miraidon, starting that clock on it and the Ditto.
Poor Dondozo being asked to take one for the team 2 games in a row. Still, I think this is a great switch out of Kayla. I think I'd rather say that, hey, I'd rather give away 95% of my Dozo's HP than Calyrex Shadows here. And the other nice thing is by getting rid of your Calyrex Shadow, you kind of force Joe to play around with a Dondozo that he doesn't really want to. Dozo's a Pokemon that's kind of known for its high HP stat, so turning into it with Ditto with a really low HP stat just really isn't what you want. Joe seems like he's not happy with Dozo either, and he's just getting it right out of here.
And I think the important thing here is recognizing that this is the same position almost as last game, except this time Miraidon is in at 50% health already. So you're actually able to switch here into something like the Grimmsnarl, which who will have to assumably eat something like a super effective Strange Theme, but Grimmsnarl is usually built to eat that, so unless it gets confused or something like that, Grimmsnarl is very fine with switching in here, and if this Dondozo go for something like a Protect, like we saw Kayla go for last game, to kind of build up those poison turns, this could be a free double swap potentially for Joe besides the Strange Theme, and that could be very, very pivotal for setting something up like the Quiver Dances on the Volcarona again.
I really have to wonder what Weezing's going to do here. Like, let's say getting a Poison Gas like as a read on these 2 new Pokemon switching and making sure that 4 and 4 are poison would be great. Maybe a Strange Steam on the Grimmsnarl coming in could be really good. Seems like Joe did bait that Dozo into protecting, which is like pretty significant amount of damage to give up on. But Kayla is able to connect a Strange Steam on Grimmsnarl coming in. And Tyson, remind me, did we see the Weezing or the Grimmsnarl go first in Game 1?
I believe we actually saw the Weezing go first, but this Grimmsnarl potentially has a chance to live something like the Strange Theme. The thing is, though, is that, again, we're in the same position. Regardless if Grimmsnarl goes down, the screens actually weren't too big of a factor last game because of how many boosts the Volcarona were able to get up. So you're kind of okay with either getting up a light screen or a Quiver Dance. If you get both up, you're in a really good spot against something like the Calyrex Shadow. But for right now, going Terra Grass and getting a Quiver Dance on the Volcarona is more than enough on a board state like this. And with no poison move other than the spikes and the steam on the Weezing, you're not able to go for super effective damage onto this Volcarona, as Strange Steam is your only attacking move. Terra Grass here is going to come out from Joe, going for that Quiver Dance, the fastest thing on the field here. Getting that plus speed attack and special defense is so important for this Volcarona to do what it wants to do late game.
Oh, so Weezing is going before the Grimmsnarl, but had to make a really tough move between poisoning both of these Pokemon or trying to use a Strange Steam to knock out the Grimmsnarl. Choosing to poison both means that Grimmsnarl is going to be left wide open to go for something like the light screen here. Dozo is not able to outrun it. So we're going to see Dozo moving last in the turn. Is this going to be a Wave Crash pointed at the Volcarona? Grass type, but no Reflect. Yeah, this is damage the Volcarona doesn't want to take. We don't see a Flame Body. Well, there is no Flame Body to activate.
Yeah, no Flame Body because, again, that Weezing has that neutralizing gas that is turning off all the abilities on the field there. And this is just a really interesting spot, right? Because, as you said before, even if Kayla didn't read last turn, she now has all 4 of Joe's Pokemon poisoned. So they are all on a timer when they're on the field. And it doesn't seem like a lot at first, but that poison chip really does add up. The Weezing here is going to switch out for Kayla as that neutralizing gas comes off, and Tatsugiri is going to be the Pokemon of choice here. This is a little scary because depending on how this Dondozo is EV'd, because the Volcarona does have that +1 speed, it potentially could still outspeed the Dondozo and go for a Giga Drain into that slot and could be a knockout.
I have to wonder, I feel like based on the fact that we saw Weezing and Grimmsnarl outrun the Dozo, I don't think this is the fastest Dondozo in the West, so if this is a Giga Drain pointed at, oh, Dozo activating a Terra as well, saying, I really want to survive a hit from this Volcarona right now.
And yeah, I mean, that's fine, but really, what are you going to do? Because this Grimmsnarl can either go for a Thunder Wave or even a Reflect in this spot is fine. Yeah, in case Kayla makes a play like this, just making sure your Volcarona lives any sort of combination. And Joe recognizes how low this Dondozo is. Who cares about Unaware? I'm setting up my Volcarona to win against everything in the back. The body press coming out here into the Volcarona, but that Reflect does so much for Joe there and allows it to eat the Citrus Berry as well. The Poison's going to bring it down to 50%, but between the Protect and the leftovers on Dozo, Kayla's going to be able to burn a few more turns of the Poison and actually might put Volcar in a little bit of a dangerous spot, even with these boosts.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Kayla's position with this like Dozo on low HP might not look so good, but against something like Volcarona that Joe is like positioned really well, I think giving your opponent a low HP Pokemon instead of a high HP one can be deceptively good, because it is, Volcarona can't really get HP back from Dozo right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The Miraidon comes in here, though. The difference in this game is, though, that instead of the Miraidon taking damage, the Volcarona is taking damage, which was the threat, admittedly, in last game. So Kayla doing a very good job at analyzing that. Not going for Protect to stall out another turn of Poison. Maybe afraid of another Quiver Dance coming out from the Volcarona, seeing how Joe played the previous turn. Not trying to lose the game from a +3 Volcarona. The Miraidon coming in here is very dangerous, though, considering no Strange Steam has been activated on it. The train is going to go up. It's not like when Weezing comes in, it's going to shut off the train. The train is here to stay now that Miraidon is on the field. And because of how fast Miraidon is, and considering this Tatsugiri is Focus Sash, this is a very scary spot to be in if you're Kayla.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Oh, so it's Weezing and just Tatsugiri out right now. I do not think this is the position that Tatsugiri wants to be looking at. I think Kayla would really prefer to have something like maybe a Weezing Calyrex on the field, but we are going to see what our little friend Tatsugiri can do for us right now. I think the fact that Miraidon doesn't have Hadron Engine activated but was able to set up an Electro Train is a big deal because it makes Electro Drift so much scarier than it would be otherwise. We're just going to see a double Protect out of Kayla to let those Poisons out up a little bit more. I think that makes sense. I don't think she has that many other options in front of her right now.
Yeah, I like this a lot. Considering that we didn't go for Protect last turn on the Dondozo, I think going for Protect this turn to burn out those extra Poison turns is going to be what you need to get back in the game. I mean, that Volcarona is looking very low, so if your Weezing is max HP, max special defense potentially, you could miraculously live a Miraidon attack here and get a knockout into the Volcarona potentially here, considering you do want to be breaking the Focus Sash on the Tatsugiri. The Giga Drain, though, is going to heal you, so the Weezing's going to need a lot of firepower to bring it. Doesn't bring it down to Sash, but definitely brings it into knockout range from any of Joe's attacks here. Going to go above 50% there. Electro Drift coming out from the Miraidon on Joe's side into the Weezing on Kayla's. Just getting the one-hit knockout there.
No Hadron Engine, no problem. Miraidon still getting an easy knockout on Weezing.
Just showing how many modifiers, just what they do for a Pokemon like Miraidon with the Hadron Engine, with the Electric Train, with the stab boosts. The Dragon Pulse doesn't even get the knockout there, and I don't believe Poison will either.
Oh, this is really interesting. So I think I like the decision to go for Dragon Pulse there a lot because your Calyrex Shadow can still knock out Miraidon. Miraidon doesn't get to touch Calyrex Shadow as long as you're going for Astral Barrage. I don't think this Volcarona can knock out Calyrex yet. I think we saw this Giga Drain like +2 calc against Calyrex in the first game. I believe we saw it do something like 70%, so Volcarona might be able to get a lot of HP back based on this Giga Drain, but if it can't knock out the Calyrex, there's still going to be an Astral Barrage to worry about here.
Yeah,
not just
and
any Astral Barrage,
like
it is going to be a helping hand on it.
Yeah, exactly. Looking with something like the Helping Hand there is absolutely huge. That's exactly what I was looking for there as the Calyrex goes for an Astral Barrage just to try to get any chance at knocking out this Volcarona. Is going to knock out the Miraidon, though, and that's going to be super huge as that's a +1. And again, with another Helping Hand next turn, that's potentially set up to knock out something like the Volcarona.
Yeah. Wow, let's think about this positioning a little bit more. So, how healthy is Joe's Grimmsnarl? It's not in great shape, is it? I don't really think it wants to take a Helping Hand +1 Barrage right now.
Yeah, and considering the fact that Ditto actually can't switch in again on that Calyrex Shadow slot, it has to come in for the Tatsugiri. You can't even play the speed tie games. You have to switch it in. But the Grimmsnarl here, yeah, I don't think is eating a +1 helping hand Astral Barrage. Thunderwave is going to be Joe's out here though. If you can get it, that will be what wins you the game here. Giga Drain also. In combination with something like the light screen and the boosts you have, +2, and the light screen is still up. If Giga Drain heals enough on the Calyrex, that's another out here as well. But it's going to be a very, very close game.
I think Volcarona has a tough decision to make with its single target attack here, because you can either try and finish off the Tatsugiri or you're going to put damage on the Calyrex. Can't do both of them.
Yeah, I think Kayla's best move is to go for that helping hand just to make sure you get the guaranteed kill, but we don't see a helping hand. Instead, Giga Drain is coming out, healing the Volcarona. The Calyrex looks like it's going to go down to maybe 2 more life orb ticks. Unfortunately there, the Dragon Pulse and the Astral Barrage coming out here from both these Pokemon if it's able to move. +1 Astral Barrage.
In play. Oh, I don't know. Oh. Volk having just a little bit too much HP to go down to that barrage. So we're going to see Ditto come in and turn into Tatsugiri. So Volcarona will go down to 1 more turn of poison unless it wants to do Giga Drain on the Tatsugiri coming in next to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually would be a very, very smart play from Joe there. And I think if you are reading something like a double protect here from Kayla to burn out those turns, that is the correct play. Dragon Pulse here. Doesn't really make too much sense, but yeah, we see Joe having that exact thought process. We see the protect there from the Tatsugiri. Let's see if the Calyrex goes for protect as well. It does! So the self-Giga Drain play from Joseph Ugarte there. Able to hear the Volcarona up and not die to that poison this turn. Able to live, and you're faster than both these Pokemon next turn, and that's going to be absolutely huge. And with something like the Paralysis there on the Calyrex Shadow on Kayla's side, you're going to be able to outspeed with the Tatsugiri, and the Volcarona is going to be able to attack the opposing Tatsugiri. So a really well played end game here from Joe.
Yeah, that's such a good play because I feel like that's one of those turns where, like, technically, that's probably a little bit closer to, like, a 50-50 kind of play, just like, you know, attack yourself or not, but it doesn't look like it. No one expects their opponent to attack themselves, and I think Joe kind of taking advantage of that, saying, like, I don't think you're going to call this out. I don't think you're going to try and play the speed tie with Tatsugiri to make sure that I can't do a Dragon Pulse. That would have been such a difficult play to stop. I think with these attacks coming, Joe is going to be able to run away with the game. I don't think I see Calyrex taking the Giga Drain from the Dragon Pulse from like 10%.
Yeah, absolutely, and really well played to both players here. I think Kayla played phenomenally here. Being able to position that poison is not easy, and getting all 4 of Joe's Pokemon poisoned and having them come down to such low amount of HP, it was a really, really close game too.
Yeah, Kayla really did a great job kind of making sure that her Pokemon were in the right slot. With Weezing, that's just something that you have to be very aware of, or like I think with Ditto, rather. Making sure that your opponent can't, like, kind of rip off your Calyrex and then threaten you with that. The fact that she forced Joe to be stuck with the Tatsugiri definitely gave her a little bit more room to play with than otherwise. And I think there were a lot of those, like, plays that Kayla was making where if you look at it closely, I think she was thinking, like, several turns ahead on a bunch of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that poison, like, sacrificing something like the Dondozo, using it as the HP sponge it is, not even combining it with Tatsugiri except that game 2, using it as this big sponge to eat damage and burn those poison turns was really, really nice. And then on top of that, having that Calyrex Shadow to kind of sweep there at the end game. You know, if you missed a Thunder Wave there from Joe, that could have been a totally different end game. So very well played from both players there. Congrats to Joe for winning 2-0 there in our round 1. I do believe that's going to be it for us for round 1 right now, and hopefully soon we can cut to a quick break, and we'll be back with you guys soon for round 2.